So we're picking up again on page 38. It's actually not a very long chapter in terms of the pages, but this particular chapter is very rich in content, a particular kind of content. If you want to use these words, you can say it's drawing a clear line of comparison between what we would call religion or religious belief and, for want of a better word, spirituality or self-cultivation. One way to say it is believing in religion or spirituality and doing religion and spirituality. And what this chapter is about is saying they're different, but they're not contradictory. This is very important. He's not saying one is better or worse, and he's not saying that one should replace the other. They can and probably should work in conjunction, but while one may be necessary, only with the other do they become sufficient for the goal. So he's framing religiosity or religious practice as having a very deep purport other than just formally going through, even sincerely going through certain devotions and rituals. We're beginning with one which has to do with charity, if you want to use that word, giving, benefiting, and so forth. And it begins with this prefect asking him the question about a certain emperor who was a great benefactor of Buddhism as it was getting established in China. And so we're now getting to the last two paragraphs tonight of chapter 38, on page 38, where he's making this distinction between doing certain acts, beneficent acts, good acts, and doing the Dharma, which he then defines as cultivating your person, cultivating your mind. One, to draw overdrawn contrast a bit, is one is external, it's manifest, it's visible, people can see it, it has a tangible aspect to it. The other is invisible, it's quiet, it's internal, it's not necessarily manifest so simply. Although, and the texts say this, when one has this inner cultivation, there is a way it shows that is very subtle, and it's in a kind of, and this is hard to define, the ancient sense of the meaning of charisma or a glow of virtue. In other words, the person's character has a radiant quality that moves and touches the person who observes, even though there's not even words necessarily spoken by this person. So it's something that we have the ability to see and to sense. We don't always know how we do that, but it's very quick. It's almost intuitive. And we can sense its absence. And so virtue, what he's talking about here, is that inner quality of self-cultivation may not be showy, it may not be on display. Nonetheless, it does have something about it that communicates, that even compels, so that when you encounter it, you are moved, sometimes to tears, to feel as if you too should be, could be, would want to be emulating and getting into that space of light and goodness. And it's all done often without even a word. And so and in some ways, this is where a lot of these sutra texts are coming from. They're coming from a knowing and seeing that's very subtle, very refined, but not without our reach. It's not outside our own reach. It's just that our sensitivity and capacity to feel has been numbed or reduced through the way we live our lives. So over time, because we numb our senses through indulgence in them, and because we numb our minds by being too scattered and not really listening and observing ourselves, and because we dull our compassionate sensibilities by taking life and being callous about the environment and so forth, we end up in a state of muted awareness. We have eyes but really can't see, we have ears we really can't hear, and we have kinesthetic sensibilities, but they're calloused. Now they're not gone, they can be reactivated. But when they are reactivated through cultivating a kind of ethical sensibility and awareness, and a really profound self-awareness of what I'm doing and the effects it has on me, on others in the environment, those qualities, that quality that comes from that sensitivity, then opens up to this knowing and seeing. And so it's a very natural thing. This is not something mystical or far out. This is something that's within the human capacity. In fact, many of the texts, and not just Buddhist texts, talk about this is our birthright. This is our primary ground of being. And the question is not how do we get it, but how do we lose it? And so the question isn't so much, I want that, I'm craving that kind of sensitivity, that intuitive, if you want to call it awakening. And the question wouldn't be so much how you get it, but how is it that how we are asleep? How is it that we're desensitized? And then by focusing on that, by removing those activities of body, mouth, and mind that desensitize, it naturally manifests by itself. It just comes into full bloom because it's not something that needs to be sought from outside, and that's his primary teaching here. So the mistake the emperor makes is on the first page. As I was saying last time or previous times, great teachers, and generally from the Buddha on, do not necessarily profess or even give philosophical discourses, except on very rare occasions. But usually they're responding and teaching according to what is asked of them, either explicitly or implicitly. Now in this case, he doesn't say that the text begins, he doesn't say anything. He goes to see this great emperor, and my guess is he comes in and the emperor probably bows, because that's the cordial thing, and everybody's shocked to see the emperor bowing because everybody bows to the emperor, so the emperor is bowing to him. But then the emperor asks his question, and so it sort of limits what the patriarch can say in response. The question then leads to this answer. He says, I have heard, all my life I've built temples, sponsored monastic ordinations, made donations, charity, and so forth, arranged vegetarian feast. What merit and virtue have I gained? Once he asks that question, the patriarch has no choice but to respond as a physician, which is to say, you're bleeding, you're sick, and you better take care of it. He thinks he's exuding goodness, virtue, and whatnot. He's expecting to be praised. And by the very nature of asking that question, he indicates his lack of virtue. Okay, this is the key. He's right. He's done a great amount of stuff. On the other hand, you can say he's the emperor, he's got all these resources, so is it really that great? I mean, this guy's got a budget that you die for to work with, so he can do all this stuff. But let's just give it that he's done some really magnificent stuff. The problem is he's asking for praise. He's asking to be flattered and kind of fawned on for doing this. And so that intention behind this question provokes the only answer that the patriarch can give. And he gives a very expedient answer. He doesn't say, well, on one hand, you've done a lot of good things, but on the other hand, blah, blah, blah. This is an emperor. So he's just like, I'm going to hit him right between the eyes. Okay? He gets you right between the eyes here. So you're thinking you're all set up, and he's probably got his entourage around thinking, oh, yes, indeed, now this patriarch's going to show what a great emperor he is. He says, nothing. You got no merit and virtue. Bang. And he couldn't take it. He couldn't take it. He didn't understand what was being taught. See, this is the thing. He didn't understand that the sixth Bodhidharma was not saying there's no goodness, there's no blessings in these acts that you've done. But he said, if you really don't waste your time with me, I'm going to really teach you. I'm going to get you past the surface, and I'm going to get you into the mind ground here, okay? Why would I waste my time, messing around with superficial questions like this? I'm going to go right to the heart of the matter. If you don't change your bad habits and faults, you're wasting this life, and you're wasting future lives. Even if you get blessings that accrue in future lives, this is all a waste. Because liberation, Bodhi, this awakening, the true nature of what we're meant to be, only comes through cleansing klesha. I use that expression. So they're klesha cleansing. Everybody knows what I mean by klesha, right? And we use this so many times in here. It's a Sanskrit word referring to any thought, feeling, emotion, habit that obstructs your full awakening in Bodhi. And it can feel afflictive, it can be disturbing, but sometimes it can feel very comfortable too. So it can be a bad habit or flaw that basically impedes your awakening. Now these are represented as very concrete terms: greed, anger, delusion, unwholesome doubt, envy, jealousy, laziness, da-da-da-da-da-da-da. There's a list of major, minor, and intermediate, so you can check it out. But what they are is very concrete. Human flaws and faults and character inadequacies or distortions that impede full awakening. And so the whole point of this doing religion as opposed to believing is to go into that ground and straighten those things out. Now, here sometimes it's the second vow of the Bodhisattva. So you see, living beings are boundless. Then what? I vow to say, you can't really save them, so that's a bad translation. Cross over, you can help, but you can't even cross them over, right? Because if you could save them or cross them over, you'd have to say, well, the Buddhas have been really lazy. How come they haven't crossed us all over yet? So, unfortunately, all they can do is point the way. So they can help liberate, but they can't cross over, really, because you have to cross yourself over. And then the second vow is, afflictions or klesha are endless, and I vow to end them, or usually it's cut them off, sever them all. But there's another problem with that translation, because what afflictions are is just your frozen Bodhi. So if you destroy them, cut them off, you've also cut off the water of your Bodhi. So if you have ice and you want water, you throw the ice out. No. And you wait for water. No. You melt the ice and it becomes water. Same substance, different form. So klesha have to be transformed and melted, so to speak, and then they become the stuff of compassion and awakening and Bodhi. So the word that's used is dwan. Afflictions are endless, dwan, which can mean to cut it off. But it also has a very sort of, I would say, dynamic meaning. It means to intercept the flow of something. So this is really beautiful because klesha tend to be like habitual energies. And often they're latent or hidden in our personality and our character, and they don't actually come up until there's some situation that brings them out. Okay? And when that happens, we quickly cover them over again. And we avoid those situations, and then we avoid people that make those situations possible. So we end up surrounding ourselves with people in an environment that, ironically, paradoxically, reinforces all of our bad habits and faults. And we call these friends and a friendly environment. Okay, so from the cultivation point of view, it's absolutely poisonous because there's no challenge to the ego. The ego is supported by klesha. The ego has layers of klesha on top of it, and it's really like almost impenetrable. So by setting it up, not only do we shield ourselves from any feedback on those, and we get irritated if people point out our faults. I do. Maybe you don't. You say, oh, thank you. Thank you for telling me what a slob I am. No, you actually, you get defensive, and then you fight back. Well, if you think I'm a slob, let me just boom, 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 and you go into them. So we have many defense mechanisms besides just ignoring it that makes it hidden. But then we have all these other habit energies that then conceal it. And then the more they're concealed, the more habitual they come, the deeper the flow of them, and the harder to recognize. And so it's not so easy as it seems. Here's an emperor, right? This guy's not a bad guy. I mean, as far as emperors goes, he's pretty cool. He's good. He's kind. I said he got rid of the death penalty. He got rid of animal sacrifices. He's supporting education in universities, not, private, you pay your own and come out with 7-figure debt. He's actually supporting people going through learning. And then he doesn't even see this. And you're thinking, wow, how could he be so clueless? But I'll tell you, it is exactly the area that we don't see that the most severe klesha is of our own. Now, we can be pretty good at recognizing others. I will give credit here. I'm sure that the emperor every day had people in front of me who said, you're too stingy. And the guy said, oh, yeah, you're right. Or you have a short temper. And they say, wow, thank you, emperor, And not just because they're afraid of losing their head. Maybe he was right. But our own faults, there's no mirror. We live in a mirrorless environment. The ego doesn't have any mirrors, except flattering pictures that have been doctored and edited. So it's like airbrushed. We have an airbrush mirror we look into, but that's me. And then the real mirror, it doesn't exist. It's just like there's nothing there. And so the emperor himself, although he's smart and he's not a bad person, and he's cultivated and he's refined and he's educated, this is one cool dude in many ways, and yet he's absolutely clueless about his basic goals. So clueless that when this great teacher comes, he says, hey, what I got? Tell me what And he doesn't even see that he's doing this, yes.
Can you go a little deeper into his question and what the giveaways are as to his off intentions? I feel a little sorry for the emperor, I guess.
He would like you. Yeah, after the Patriarch leaves, he said, aren't you all feeling sorry for... Yes, he treated you so, thank you. I got a whole new group of friends.
Well, is there a way he could have asked questions clearly if he really was interested?
Right. Okay, so this is a fun exercise. This is what you call an imaginary exercise. It's like, what could he have said, right? So
the game part,
you can see that this is a non-starter, right? I mean... This thing is not where you start. Come on, tell me how great I am. First of all, you've got a great master of the way, someone who is coming, obviously, with a mind-to-mind transmission, and you get this shot once in a lifetime. And so it's like, what could you have said? You could be like Sudana, the pure Sudana. You bow, and you say, oh, great master, I've done all these worldly things, but I realize they don't amount to diddle compared to cultivating my mind, and look at what you have cultivated. You have ragged robes. You don't look refined. Your hands are dirty like this. You don't have an entourage or anything, and yet I know you're a great person. What I have is really nothing. Anybody can do this. Anybody can be an emperor and make money. Sorry, I don't want to go into present politics. Anybody can get rich, okay? But he's saying what you have, you've conquered yourself. You have a far greater wealth because you're content. You're not seeking anything anymore. You're not even seeking praise. Whoa, and he said, teach me that, would you? How do you do that? Now, that would have been a different conversation, okay? And the 6 patriarchs would say, oh, not bad, not bad. Let's start there. But there was no way he could start there unless he demolished where this person had set up his huge edifice wall. And so what he did expediently, in some ways, he just smashed the wall, the obstacle. He didn't use kid gloves. And the emperor had that wall, couldn't take it. And so he just, after this, the story is that he basically turned his back on Bodhidharma, and that was the end of it, at least in that encounter. So you can see the first question doesn't make, but you can see there's a number of ways you could have come at this and actually had a very, maybe even awakening interchange between the emperor and the, right? So this is what he was hitting at, and basically what he was saying, the very nature of you asking that question is egotistical. It's self-aggrandizing. It's looking for flattery and praise. All of these qualities are thieves to your virtue. they rob your virtue because they inflate your ego. And your ego is basically an empty thing that you've constructed and that you're holding together. And if you really want to get awakened, you should be undismantling that ego. I don't say erasing the ego, because again, then you're back to erasing the ground of your being. You have to transform the ego from this small, petty, grasping, seeking thing into this great capacity that he calls the awakened nature, Buddha. So you go from the ordinary, small-minded, petty person into Buddha, not by smashing your ego, but by taking all these sort of supporting ties and bonds and paints and coverings that you put over it, and you let it open up to its full capacity. Now, he gave a shot at it. The emperor couldn't take it, and he just reinforced his ego again. But that's what's going on here. So this is really important because I once said this, but my experience with my teachers was 99 point some percent, all about this kind of stuff. Day after day after day, nitpicking. This little show of jealousy, this little show of arrogance, this little show of pouting. I didn't get my way. Pout, pout, pout. This little show, this big show of criticizing, finding fault. Okay? This way place doesn't have good food. The monks don't speak clearly. The Weno is out of tune. The instruments sound tinny. Why don't they translate it better? Blah, 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 blah. Constant fault finding, okay? And then of your peers, fault finding. I'm going to be a good Dharma friend and point out your faults to you so you can get enlightened. First of all, here's my list, right? And it didn't take long to compile because your faults are so obvious, right? I mean, they're just glaring, right? You don't see them? Oh, that's why I'm here. I'm a bodhisattva. So then what you do is you just keep pointing out everybody's faults, thinking you're crossing them over. Who said that? Right. Let me cross you over. Oh, I'm really tired. I'm crossing over all these people. What about yourself? Myself. I'm already there. I'm bringing you over to my shore, right? So this kind of fault, which is the emperor's fault, which is called arrogance, and it's one of the major kleshas, he doesn't see. Even after the Bodhidharma whams him with it to say there's no merit in virtue, his next question, he would say, why? What did I do wrong? Couldn't even begin to form that question. Get out of here. You're not a great teacher. That's his response. Instead of saying, you just whammed me, I can take that, tell me why I have no merit in virtue. And then he could have responded. So he still could have asked his first question. And when Bodhidharma says nothing, he say, that's not what I figured. So could you help me with the math here? And then the Patriarch said, well, merit and virtue doesn't have anything to do with all these superficial acts. In fact, he would say, a very famous line from a text is, you're competing. You're striving to be number one. That's why you're asking the question. The question is, mirror, mirror on the wall, who's the greatest of them all? You are, Emperor. Thank you. Okay, that's what he wants. That's called competing and striving. It's actually called fighting and contending. Now, we think fighting and contending is violent. It's not necessarily so. It can be very gentle and smooth. It can be smooth as butter. You know, as you manipulate and get people into your circle of admiring friends, that's fighting and competing. And as you quietly backbite and stab other people for their faults, putting them down so you look a little better, that's also, but it doesn't seem like it's violent, right? So that kind of contending as fighting, the texts say is a sign of a petty person. So it says the superior person or the exemplary person does not like to fight and compete. Only petty people fight and compete. Now, it's not just fighting and competing violently with wars and aggression and whatever, or intellect or wealth, you know, to be the most, but it's also vying and competing to be looked upon as the best, the greatest, to have more friends, to have all this admiring attention paid to you, to always shine. So if a question is asked, I know, you know. And this kind of thing can be very subtle, but it's just as damaging. So the first part of that passage says, the superior person does not, only petty people fight and contend for this. And then the next line, very interesting, says, And the exemplary person, superior person, does not advertise or display their virtue. People who advertise and display their virtue, asking questions like, how much do I have? The text actually says, have no merit and virtue. And this is not from this text, it's from another text. They actually lack virtue because the very way of wanting to display it and show it is egotistical, fighting, and therefore not associated with true virtue, which is something that comes intrinsically from becoming and being almost the best person you can possibly be, and not instrumentally seeking to have rewards, praise, attention, flattery, fawning, or any of that. Okay? So that's the difference between intrinsic and instrumental. Instrumental is the blessings he's talking about. You did this instrumentally, and there's a good result that comes from this. It's a quid pro quo. Virtue has no quid pro quo. It's done intrinsically for its own sake because you know to be fully human, you have to tap into this potential, no matter what people say. This is really important. Whether they praise you for it or they slander you for it. Where are you going? I'm going to the temple. Why are you going there? Well, I'm going to the Buddhist temple because there's talks about Sutras. You ever see anybody who studied Sutras and got rich? No. Right? Right, it's stupid. And the men sit on one side and the women sit. It's not even a mixer. You know, it's not even a mixer. And then afterwards, I mean, and you just sit there quietly, contemplating your navel or something, right? Useless. Why don't you be on your phone, Skyping, making business, right? So you're not going to necessarily get praised in doing that. But if you say, I got to do it. I got to do it. First of all, there's nothing else to do. I've tried everything else, and it's pretty stupid. So this is all that's left. So this is my last shot at something significant. Friday night, Saturday night, it's my last shot. Not a bad last shot, but, you know. Sometimes you get there in reverse. In other words, you try everything else and just say, this is all. I can remember one night there was a nun. Everybody in the master said, so why are you all here? I'm here to get awakened. I'm here to have wisdom. I'm here, you know, blah, blah, blah. And the master said, why are you here? She said, nothing else to do. And he said, that's a good answer. So, whether you're praised for it and say, oh, you're going to the temple, Gunga Wuliang, you know, limitless merit and virtue, I only wish I could do it, blah, blah, blah. You're such a great bodhisattva, you've given up your job to do this and that, and then you're, oh, yeah, well, don't turn on, come on. If you're moved by that, it's still not virtue. Okay? So either way, slander, praise, whatnot, you can't, then maybe there's something, and you're doing it for another reason. Why are you doing it? For a reason that only your heart knows truly. And it's really true because you're being so true to yourself that you're not even caring whether you get praised or slandered. In fact, you feel like at that point in your life, you've looked at things really squarely and you come to the conclusion, if I don't do this, if I don't really try to figure out what this is about in myself and find my true self, I've wasted a whole life. No matter what else I accumulate. If I don't know myself and I don't activate that intrinsic inherent wisdom, I've wasted my life, no matter what else I get. And you know this yourself. You can say, well, other people say I haven't, or other people say I have. It doesn't matter. When you wake up at 3:34 in the morning, you kind of take inventory, you know. You know where it's at. You've either worked with it or you've neglected it. Yes?
So, when I read that passage, I have to say I came at it from another perspective, I think, and that to me it seemed like the emperor was more exasperated with himself, saying, saying like, I've done all this stuff, and what good has it done me? You know, to me that said that he was already halfway there, and that the master was kind of ham-fisted.
Was what
ham-fisted. Didn't really.
Oh, didn't have an answer?
No, didn't really handle it well.
Oh.
I mean, could have brought him along, because I think he was, the way I read it, he was already saying like, I've tried all these things and it hasn't worked.
I think you could go that direction, but the actual encounter itself doesn't follow up with the natural response that would support it. In other words, he did not change his ways after this.
Yes.
Okay? And he also rejected and kicked him out.
Mm-hmm.
and brought the conversation to an end. If he was where you were saying and he said nothing, he would have said, I had that feeling. I sort of had that feeling, so let's work on this. But he didn't. He was completely affronted by this. Moreover, he had the habit of putting his name on the temples and monasteries that he donated.
Yeah.
So you could say, Great Compassionate Liang Wu Di Monastery. And it's like, okay. So a number of markers would lean towards the fact that he didn't get it, and that he actually was looking for, as many emperors are when they have visitors, a sort of homage, or the other thing is that you bring gifts and you patronize. And so he had basically, if you want to say, hoodwinked the entire religious community in China at that time to be supportive of him, to be in praise of him, and to enjoy his patronage in return. Yeah. And so this person comes in, and he's playing the same game, but this guy doesn't play back. And so not only does he send them away, from all we know, and it goes on to say that he ended then by being basically cooed out in a coup and starved to death, and would indicate that there wasn't then a corresponding change in behavior. But again, like yours, we could rewrite this and say, had he done that, you could have a different outcome. It wasn't fixed that because it happened this way doesn't mean it had to happen this way. Yes?
I think the whole, in the bigger picture, this whole episode looks like a perfect storm. But it did teach so many people. This is a perfect example of people understand what is virtue and what is blessing. That for many, many years.
But what's interesting about this, although this is the case, now you have some time later in the Tang Dynasty, Prefect Wei, who's heard this story. I mean, this story's been regaled, right? It's like Aesop's fables in China, right? And he basically said, I don't get it. So he's saying to the sixth patriarch, why did you, what happened here? I don't get it. So although it's sort of a powerful story, he didn't get it. Now, we can reflect on why Prefect Wei didn't get it. Because in a sense, he's reincarnating, I don't say he is but he's reincarnating the same mindset that he himself. He's just sponsored a vegetarian feast, just all this whole thing, right? And so he's thinking, wow, the story, I never really got that story. See, sometimes the stories we don't get, it's not because they're confusing. It's because we have put up blocks to being hit that way. It's really interesting. People, I don't get this sutra. I don't like this sutra. Oh, really? What don't you like about it? It rubs me the wrong way. Oh, really? I don't feel comfortable. Oh, really? So the only time you can feel rubbed clean and comfortable is when you're in full awakening. Before that, it'll hurt. Truth hurts. The Chinese expression, good medicine bitter to the taste, true words hard on the ears. This kind of thing. So that's why I'm saying even Prefect Wei, didn't get it at this point. Yeah, I tell you the true story for me. Okay, I mean, I've told this before, but it's kind of apropos. I walk into the monastery for the first time, and it's over in San Francisco, Gold Mountain Monastery, and I think, I can take anything once. I'll go in and check this place out one night. So I walk in, and immediately my sensibility, on one hand, I feel immensely at home. It's like, wow, this is... And then my other sensibilities kick in and say, oh my God, all these icons and statues, gilded images, hands and arms sticking out everywhere, incense and whatnot. And going, whoa, 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 whoa. This is what Sister Mary Prisca warned me about. This is called idolatry. This is pagan worship. And here I am in the pagan center of San Francisco. And they have a big called Guanyin with all these arms. So it's not even like the Virgin Mary. Virgin Mary looks like a Virgin Mary. Guanyin doesn't look like Virgin Mary. I'm sorry, Guanyin looks like, a Hydra with all these arms and eyes. Yeah, see, like that. Okay, if you take away the background, you say, kind of like Virgin Mary, but then where do these things come from? And so And I'm thinking, wow, and now all these people are bowing to these things. So that's the second thing. Not only am I in the hall with them, now they're bowing to him. So this is one of the 10 Commandments. That's worshiping false gods, okay? So, even though I'm not a Catholic really at this time, the psychology is still there. Those nuns, when they give you instructions at 5 and 7 years old, they stay a long time. I'll just tell you, you don't just easily get them out of your consciousness. You might get them out of your intellect, but your psyche can be informed for a long time. So that they're bowing to images. I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to bow to these images. So then the abbot, the master, comes down, and they bow to him. And I got this is way over the top. Okay, I can understand how you might project onto these images, but this is an ordinary human being from all I can tell. Why are you people, humiliating yourselves by kowtowing? And I'm sort of thinking John Wayne. I don't kowtow to nobody. So it's like, okay, so this is really weird, and I'm not going to do it. So I just sort of stand there, like taking it in, a tourist. And so, but I think, okay, I'll sit here for the lecture, and then it's in Chinese. I'm going, oh, God. Whoa, and I don't understand Chinese, but then it gets translated, so I'm listening, and then all of a sudden in the middle of the lecture, this person that everybody bowed to sort of goes on a riff, away, sort of bouncing off the text, and says, well, the reason a lot of people don't become Buddhas and Bodhisattvas is because their egos are too big, they're really full of themselves, they're arrogant, and in their minds, they're number one, everybody's number 2 or 3, and one of the manifestations of this is they really don't like bowing. They hate the image of bowing, and they feel like bowing to anyone is to basically, how they self-efface them, and and to worship false gods, and you go on and on. And he said, but basically it's not about false gods, it's about arrogance and not being able to see anybody equal to or even better than yourself. And so they only come with the idea they want others to bow to them, but they don't want to bow, he's going on and on. And as I'm sitting there, and there's like maybe 100 people in the hall, I'm really feeling like this is being directed at me. And I think, why would that be directed at me? It's almost like you're in a dark room and then the spotlight hits you. You're going, huh, what? And, I'm thinking, wow, this feels uncomfortably true. I'm using that oxymoron, uncomfortably true. And I'm thinking, oh, man. And then suddenly I have an awakening. And my awakening is, I'm arrogant. Whoa. And the next part of the awakening was, and I had never knew I was arrogant. I was so arrogant, I had no even the slightest glimmer that I was arrogant until he started talking like this. And I thought, oh, wow. Not only is he talking about me, but he knows me better than I know myself. And it was like this moment of, I didn't know what to do. Should I get up and run? Should I stay there? If I get up and run, everybody will know he's talking about me. But if I stay there and just sort of like, oh, money pot me, nobody will know, and it'll be cool. But then I'm really wrestling with it. I think, wow, this has never happened to me before. Nobody's ever told me that. Maybe they tried. My sisters insist that they tried, but it was, on deaf ears. And suddenly I realized, oh my gosh, that's true of me. That's me. And so after that, you all know the story. I didn't want to be seen bowing, and I really didn't want to bow, but I felt I should acknowledge at least somebody who knew me better than I knew myself. And it was kind of a medicinal feeling. It was like a little release to have that. So I waited till everybody was in front of him doing their thing, and I was way in the back behind everybody standing there. It's like 5 rows deep. And so I look left and right, there's nobody, and I go down in a bow. A really chintzy, cheap little bow. I don't even know if I formally touched my head. And you're like, okay, I did it. And I come up, and then everybody's split open. There's just like here, like the Red Sea. And there's the master sitting on his cushion, and me. Now it's really spotlight. And everybody's kind of looking back, like, because he told everybody to do this while I was down. And so, and he's looking at me, and I'm going, wow, I've been caught. And of course, then it hurt even more. Why would it embarrass me if I was not arrogant? Oh man, this was really, it's like boom, punch, then a left hook. And I thought, oh no, now he's going to crush me. And all he said was, does it hurt? And that was it. And so interestingly, after that, my practice wasn't meditation, it wasn't reciting, it was bowing. And I used bowing for almost the next 2.5 to 3 years as my major, and I hated it. I didn't, but what it was I sort of recognized it was the polish I needed on my roughest edges. And so even though I didn't like it, I took it because that's where I needed to be rubbed. And then he would say at times, he said, well, bowing is really not you're bowing to something or somebody out there. Bowing is really eradicating or subduing your arrogance and pride. It's a countervailing thing. So done correctly, it's virtue. But done for show or for seeking something from Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, it's not virtue, because it's not done on the mind ground. So that's why I'm saying in here, he doesn't throw these things out. He says the same thing done with the right mind can be virtue. Done with the wrong mind, it might be blessings, or it might even be offenses. So this is interesting. One single practice, bowing, sitting in meditation, done with the right mind can be virtuous and lead to awakening. Done with a sort of mixed mind can sort of be not bad. At least you're not out harming or whatnot. But done with the wrong mind, it can actually be a form of klesha. It can actually turn into a karmic obstacle. So that's why he says mind ground intentionality is everything here. It's not the superficial act doing this or that. That's what's important. 9 o'clock. Okay, now I have to confess again. Not only did I not do the last 2 paragraphs here, which is really kind of getting at what I was talking about tonight, because they're all about very specific human frailties and foibles and not metaphysical. He's saying if just take a look. We don't have to spend a great deal of time. He says, belittling others, slighting them even in your mind or your heart, not even saying it, constantly being self-centered, no merit. If you're vain and false and you lack virtue. And he says this very interesting kind of psychological insight. It's only because they consider themselves great that they belittle others. And reverse that, they belittle others because they want to feel great in comparison. So it has nothing to do with helping or benefiting others. It's all about how I feel if I belittle them. I feel then great. So he's actually saying belittling. Now, this is interesting. It doesn't mean that you don't criticize. Because Dharma friends criticize each other, but when they criticize, you don't feel harmed by it. You feel cleansed. When you're criticized and you feel harm, it's not merit and virtue. There's something else going on. There's ego involved. In the same way, Dharma friends support, but without fawning and flattering. So you feel support without being sort of played up to. You feel support not being flattered. And you can be criticized without being harmed. That's why it says the Tao is the only knife that can cut without harming. It's a really wonderful expression. Then the last paragraph says, then what is it? In thought after thought, you're watching yourself. You're watching your intentions. You're unbiased and sincere. Now, sincere means you have no ulterior motives. You're truly doing it for its own sake. It doesn't mean I'm sincere because what's inside is outside. That's a kind of superficial Western notion of sincerity. Inside and outside are the same. Well, if inside's really mucky and you're outside, you say, I'm sincere. I'm just telling you what I feel, No. That's not what sincerity means here. True. Your intentions are true and you don't have ulterior motives. It's not necessarily just the absence of hypocrisy. It's the absence of malice. In thought after thought, unbiased, sincere, straightforward, that's virtue. No manipulation, no guile, no games playing. You don't deceive others, you don't deceive yourself. A true cultivator, a person in this, is like talking to nature. It's like going into the woods and having a conversation with the trees and the water. It's like meeting someone who lives in the forest and is not citified. And there's really straight talk. We don't see many people like that anymore. You have to go far away to find someone who's not a little bit manipulative, cynical, sarcastic, has double, triple irony to everything they say, right? It's cool. But it's not true talk. A person that's like this is almost like talking to a 3-year-old. Really? How come? Why? Boom. No intermediary thing going on there. That's sincere, straightforward. Cultivating one's own person is virtue. You're cultivating yourself. You're cultivating your own person. That's where you're putting your attention. Good and wise friends, merit and virtue must manifest within your own nature. Do not seek for them by making donations and offerings. And that's the difference between blessings and merit and virtue. Emperor Wu did not understand, and the Patriarch was not wrong. He ends up on this one there. So again, I want to point out, he's not saying donations, charity, doing good deeds is wrong or bad. He's simply saying, done just with the instrumental notion that I'm doing this for that, you will get some return on that because it's karmically good and done deeds. But if you're talking about getting awakened and realizing your true nature, then that alone is not sufficient because that kind of thing has to come from deep self-transformation. It comes from change, it comes from cleansing. And it's not done through these acts. It's actually done through a deep, reflective insight into who you really are and then cleaning out and letting go one by one of all these kleshas. Okay, so that's the difference. The second one is harder to do, but some of the texts will say, but it's even harder to not do it. Because in not doing it, the opposite accumulates. The layers of klesha get thicker. The tendrils grow stronger and stronger. And when you finally set out to do it, you have that much more to unpack. So the idea here is that it's easy to be superficially good, but not intrinsically good, is a short sell to yourself. And the neat thing about it is once you set your mind on that, you forget about time. You don't say, oh, I only have a year left or 10 years left. With that mind in that place, that true mind is all that is a measure of anything. A change in consciousness is the only thing that matters here, and not how much time is ticked off. In fact, and sometimes when you go here, the progress you make is really fast. It's really fast because you've made a true statement that I am not going to BS anymore. And when you do that, it's amazing how fast things can fall away. But if you kind of pretend, you kind of hang on, you keep a little corner, whatnot, it's surprising how long it can just last in that state of mediocrity, right? So a true mind, there's no way to measure the effect of that. But what the teaching says here, once you made that seed for the true mind, it's in your consciousness. Life comes, life goes, but that seed will eventually bear immense fruit. So don't even worry about time. Only worry that you're not planting that seed. And certainly don't worry what other people say. Except if they're Dharma friends and they're supporting you in criticism. Okay, so again, I promised a story and I told a different story. So next week, I will come back to this story I wanted to tell you. It's actually from a Terry Gotha text, but this sort of came up tonight. So we will stop here and do the transference announcement.
Yes, tomorrow we'll have a special guest.
Your leg fell asleep?
Yes.
Oh.
The elder monk will come here. Elder monk Shao Yun, the monk who was the attendant Venerable Empty Klaus Shiyun in his final years, and he will give talk here from 10 a.m. to 11, and will be also Q&A, and also we have tomorrow from 3 to 5 p.m. the Guqin recital. Guqin recital, this Chinese
Recital?
system. Yeah.
Oh, really?
Yes.
How many people here are doing the recital tomorrow? Come on, don't be humble. What? You are? Suzanne is? No, I go through the room and I hear the Guqins and I see you all there, and now it's like, what, Guqin? Never heard of it. There are people in here. How many people are doing the recital tomorrow? Just two. Okay. I promise I won't come and play the Guqin. So you'll get a... Do you know what the Guqin is? Anybody know what a Guqin? Yeah, it's how many strings? 7 long strings on a board, a piece of wood, and it's played with both hands, and it's an acoustic instrument. I don't think they have electronic Guqin, do they?
Not yet.
And it's a form, it can be a form of self-cultivation because it takes a certain amount of sensitivity and refinement to play it and to listen to it. And in doing it, you can do it in a meditative way. So it's actually an aid to the way. It's one of those things that martial arts can be an aid to the way. Music and calligraphy can also be aids to the way. If they're done in the right way. Otherwise, they can be offenses. So tomorrow, I'm sure it'll be an aid to the way. So there's a Guqin concert, 3 to 5?
7:30 Avatamsaka lecture
Okay.
by Reverend Heng Shu, who is back.
He's back from Australia.
Yes, and on Sunday we have the all day long Amitabha's name recitation from 7 a.m. Until 4 p.m.
Okay.
Can I just add briefly to the master who's coming in the morning? I actually heard him speak at CCTV this afternoon. He was that was a very amazing. Oh, Yona is going to get the mic. So I just wanted to add a few words on the master who's coming tomorrow morning. His other name is Xuanda. He's actually a Dharma brother in the same lineage as Master Hui. So he gave a talk this afternoon at the City of 10,000 Buddhas. Myself and a few others were there. And it was a very impressive talk. The chant master with definitely teaching us chant today. Anyway, you're just saying that and, kind of encouraging people to go because I thought it was a really worthwhile person to see.
So tomorrow, 10 o'clock here in this hall, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I would pretty much just echo what Feder just said. You can sense that he has some virtue. He has that kind of very patriarch tone of voice, very straight, very direct, and also very transparent. You can sense that. Yeah, I think you'll be good.
So don't miss out on this opportunity. What happened?
Well, we have to turn up the volume so people can hear.
Oh,
Feedback is like a mirror.
I'm a little old for a voice change. I was just okay, we'll do the transference. May every living being, our minds as one and radiant with light, share the fruits of peace with hearts of goodness, luminous and bright. If people hear and see how hands and hearts can find in giving unity, may their minds awake to great compassion, wisdom, and to joy. May kindness find reward. May all who sorrow leave their grief and pain. May this boundless light break the darkness of their endless night. Because our hearts are one, this world of pain turns into paradise. May all become compassionate and wise. May all become compassionate and wise. Ding li san bao.